Hey, movie lovers! I'm Brandon.
And I'm Leia.
And we're beyond delighted to welcome you back to the movie theater lobby once again, so we can get together and chat about the world within and beyond the screen of a variety of movies. Before we get underway, I'd very much like to draw your attention to our wonderful concession stand, which just so happens to have all the snacks and drinks of your preference. So please, grab the snacks that enhance your life, get snugly on the chair of your choice, and make sure your attention is focused, your disbelief is fully suspended, and imagination is completely unfettered as we journey through the fantastical and wonderful world of
Big Fish.
In telling the story of my father's life, it's impossible to separate fact from fiction, the man from the myth.
All right, Leia, do you think we should get into the plot at this point?
Yeah, let's do it.
Just real brief. Let's try to make it fast. Plenty to talk about with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Big Fish is a fantasy drama from 2003 based on a novel by Daniel Wallace. We start with the story of a legendary, uncatchable fish of enormous size that rules the water in which it lives. That is, until it is understood that said fish was inhabited by the ghost of an infamous thief and is finally caught by Edward when he uses his wedding ring as bait on the day of his son's birth. Edward Bloom is our narrator, played both by Ewan McGregor as his younger persona in the past, and by Albert Finney as his older self in the present day. Edward's stories are as over-the-top, larger-than-life, and legendary as the fish he claims to have caught. He's been telling them all of his life and captivating the imaginations of his friends and family, and of course, his son Will. Will, played by Billy Crudup, was born in the ordinary world in the usual manner. In contrast, Edward was born in an extraordinary world in an unusual manner, bursting forth from his mother's loins and sliding down the hospital hall, slipping through the hands of doctors and nurses alike. A big start for a big personality. Will loved his father's whimsy until the day of his wedding, when he finally felt that his father's stories were simply lies and exaggerations and a show of egotistical self-importance, stealing the spotlight on Will's day. At this point, Will decides he's had enough of his father's aggrandizing style and refuses to speak to his father.
After that night, I didn't speak to my father again for 3 years.
3 years passed, and we find that Edward has cancer and is left with a very short time to live. Will's wife, Josephine, played by Maria Cotillard, insists that he go spend time with his father in his final days. Still exasperated with his father's stories, Will does his best to reconcile with his father, but Edward will not give up on his larger-than-life stories despite the pleas of his son.
I just want to know the true versions of things, events, stories. You.
Finding an audience in Josephine, who's not been completely exposed to all of Edward's tales, we learn about the fables that make up Edward's life. Edward continues charming his family and us with adventures of swamp witches, prophecies of death, giants, haunted forests, hidden paradises, unending labors, werewolves, dangerous military service, conjoined twins in the pursuit of true love, foibles of accidental criminal experiences, and more. While Edward captivates his family, let's leave this plot in his much more charismatic and capable hands, and one final quote.
A man tells his stories so many times that he becomes the stories. They live on after him. And in that way, he becomes immortal.
I love that.
It's very nice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A grand little statement.
It's gonna make me cry again.
Oh, here we go. Let the waterworks go. Folks, if you end up having to swim at the end of this episode because of Leia's tears, we apologize.
They're probably a little bit of yours, too.
Maybe some.
Yeah.
Well, I kept it brief. As
was
brief as
good.
I could.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that's probably the fastest plot synopsis I've ever done.
I think so. And it was one of the more colorful ones, too.
Oh, thank you.
I really liked the verbiage you used.
Oh boy, setting high bars now. Great. Episode 5, and now I've got more work to do on all the rest.
Yeah, this is the bar you've got to set for yourself this early in the game.
Damn it, Brandon.
Yeah.
Well,
Way to go.
I guess with more tasks in my future, let's start looking at some of the people that brought this film to our imaginations.
Yeah.
Who would you like to start with?
Actually, I would really like to start with director Tim Burton.
All right, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I feel like without his vision and who he was and everything that he did, this just wouldn't be as good as it was.
It could have been a very different film with a very different
Could have
director.
been, yeah. Who was supposed to direct it? Steven Spielberg?
Steven Spielberg was
Yeah.
initially attached, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a different film.
It definitely would have. Not that he would have done a poor job of it. It just, I feel like Tim Burton has that extra fantastical vision.
He has an extra, what do you say, Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you got about Tim Burton for us?
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but Tim Burton's directorial debut was The Island of Dr. Agor in 1971.
Oh, no kidding.
So he's been doing this for quite some time.
Some experience.
That was his very first film. And then as I was looking through his filmography, I didn't realize this, and I feel stupid for not realizing it. I feel like you've mentioned it before, so I feel like I did know, but like it surprised me anyways.
You'd probably stop listening to me at one point.
I don't know, but I didn't realize he directed Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1985, and it makes so much sense because all those puppets kind of had a very Beetlejuice-esque feel to them. The whole thing actually had a very Beetlejuice-esque feel to them, speaking of which he also did Beetlejuice. Of course. I didn't realize he did Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, another sort of very fantastical feeling adventure film. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice.
Batman, Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns. I didn't realize he did Mars Attacks.
No, really?
Yeah, I feel dumb. I feel stupid.
No reason to feel stupid. Mars Attacks was a fantastic film on its own. You don't need to know who directed it.
Right?
It's just great.
I also didn't know he did Dumbo.
Yeah, the new live action.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right. It's impossible to know everybody's filmography.
I know, but that one's a big one.
Yeah, sure.
I have to see. I don't think I've seen Dumbo yet.
We haven't
seen that yet.
In fact, we haven't watched many of the live-action Disney remakes, to be honest.
Yeah, it might be worth watching.
Yeah, I'm sure they're fun in their own right.
Yeah.
He's the writer of Nightmare Before Christmas as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the themes from that shows up in Big Fish.
Yeah.
He's really known for like black and white, kind of circusy colors and skulls and all that stuff kind of here and there very, very briefly shows up.
Yeah. So. Shows little fingerprints all over this movie as
I think his tie has something on it from Nightmare Before.
Yeah, there's like a slight Nightmare Before Christmas homage kind of thing. Absolutely. I also did want to mention that his first job in the film industry was as an animator for Disney as well. Yeah. That shows a little connection in his history of work throughout the area of cinema. Oh, and did we mention Edward Scissorhands?
Yeah, I do believe we did.
Okay,
but
good.
Yes.
In case
I said it really fast, but yes.
All right, great. In case we didn't, there it is again. And sure, why not mention it twice?
Yeah, right.
Great film. I love it.
It's worth mentioning it twice. Yeah. There's also Edward Scissorhands. Of course, he has scissors on his fingers. In Big Fish, there's this whole thing with the hand that he's selling.
Yeah.
They explicitly said they weren't going to put scissors on this hand because
they didn't avoid that reference.
Yeah, they didn't want to put that reference in there.
Yeah. Even when I saw the hand in the film, even without realizing that they omitted scissors from the hand on purpose, it still made me think of.
If they put the scissors there, you really would have thought about it.
It definitely would have evoked that movie for sure.
They were right there. So Helen Bonham Carter was also in this.
Yeah, kind of a small role, but she's there, absolutely.
She met Tim Burton actually on the set of Planet of the Apes.
Ah.
And I think it's kind of funny because he has a phobia of chimpanzees.
Does he really? Oh, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, he's got a fear of chimpanzees. So he met Helen, which she has a son with, Billy Ray, their son. And I think they live together-ish. From what I understand, they live on two different wings of a house. But yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Who else have we got in our lineup here?
Daniel Wallace. He's the writer of the novel.
Absolutely.
Another person for whom we wouldn't have this film.
In fact, the only person without whom we'd not have this film.
In fact, I'm pretty sure the book hadn't even really been wildly publicized yet, and they already had picked it up.
Yeah, in fact, John August, the person who wrote the screenplay for this, he actually had gotten a hold of a manuscript of this book before it was even published. And based on just reading the manuscript, he went to the studio and insisted that they buy the rights to it before the book was even published.
Yeah.
So that's good on you, Daniel Wallace, for writing a super compelling story, and hooray for John August for seeing the potential in it.
Yeah, I think that was also another reason why Tim Burton became involved in this film. Tim Burton's parents both died within 3 years of each other, and his mother died like 2 months before he was offered this directorial opportunity. Yeah. And he took it because he actually, the story resonated with him in his life with losing his parents.
Sure, yeah.
So that's kind of also why, because it's not really, I think, in his, I don't want to say wheelhouse, because clearly it's in his wheelhouse, but it's not his MO. You know, it's not usually the type of stuff he does.
It's super romantic and
Yeah, and whimsical,
Yeah.
like whimsical's
Yeah,
not
he
a
likes
good word. He
whimsy.
likes whimsy,
Yeah.
but it was just it's touching. It's a sad, touching kind of story, and
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
really that's not really his thing usually. But the story resonated with him because of his loss of his parents. So
I can absolutely understand that for sure. To kind of go back to Daniel Wallace again, what can you tell us about Daniel Wallace?
Did you know he collects glass eyes?
No way.
So he's got a glass eye collection, and that's kind of one of the reasons why there's a scene where the witch has this glass eye.
Absolutely.
He puts that in all of his stories.
Huh.
Is something to do with glass eyes because of his obsession with glass eyes.
I honestly didn't know that. Never would have guessed. What an unusual hobby. That's
right?
pretty outstanding.
It's an unusual thing.
Yeah, I like that.
I also read about his political beliefs and his religious beliefs, and I like the man even more.
Oh, yeah.
He said, and this is quote, "It is fair to say that I'm left of center, far left, when it comes to his political beliefs." And then he also said, "I think a lot of people default to Jesus when something inexplicable happens. I write things I didn't know I was capable of writing, and sometimes that feels like magic. It isn't. It's just me. A similar thing happens when a tornado blows someone's house away, but their cat is found unscathed in an oak tree. God must have been looking out for Pookie. We're hardwired to do this, I think, because we've been doing it since the beginning." So that's his, and says he's an agnostic. So I wouldn't say he's an atheist, but he's an agnostic. And so when I read that, I was like, I like this guy. He's
similar soul.
Yeah, I think that's why his stories are so good, though, because he's not bringing a lot of that other stuff in there. It's all from his heart.
He can see the fantastical and the majestic and not have to put a reason or explicable nature to it.
Yeah.
You can just have fun with it and accept it as what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, I just want to reiterate, all power to you for your own political beliefs and religious beliefs.
We're just not.
But do your thing out there, folks.
Yep, it's all you.
Let everyone live their lives, man.
He does appear in the film. I don't know if you knew that, but
I did.
Just
real short.
He appears as Sanders' economics professor at Auburn, which is also interesting because he is currently now a professor and lecturer in the English department at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he attended college.
Atta boy.
Yeah. So it was probably an easy role for him because he's done it before.
Well, and I think it's a step up from his first job, which, not a step up.
No, not a step up.
I'm not going to say that. In fact, I did say that. I take it back.
Take it back.
It's not a step up. It's just a very different path. Yeah, his first job was as a veterinary assistant.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then after that, he worked at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Okay. So I read he worked at a bookstore and he was an illustrator. He did greeting cards and magnets and stuff like that for like 13 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's right. Yeah. So I think I actually do remember as the veterinary assistant.
Yeah.
That's funny because I was too for a brief time.
Oh, what do you know?
Man, this man and I.
You got something in common.
We got something in common,
Next, you're going to be teaching, what was it, English?
No, I won't be. That's definitely his strong suit, not mine.
Oh, that's all right.
I can write a good story, though.
You sure can.
Yeah.
I've read a few. They're phenomenal, folks. So after Daniel Wallace, let's take a little bit of a closer look to John August, maybe.
Yeah, who did the screenplay for the novel.
Yeah, he did. We mentioned previously that he had gotten a hold of that manuscript and seemed to have absolutely fallen in love with it, brought it to the studios, brought studios to Daniel Wallace, and all of that's history. But John August is also known for a few other fairly high-profile screenplays.
Especially Tim Burton stuff. He likes to do a lot of Tim Burton
stuff. Seems to be a constant collaborator. Yeah, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, Frankenweenie, Dark Shadows is another Tim Burton one. So he did all of those. He also did the Don Bluth film, Titan A.E.
I love that film.
Which is, I know when I read that, I was like, oh, Brandon loves that movie. I like that movie
Such
too.
a good sci-fi adventure.
Yeah. And then he did Go back in the day as well.
Way back in the day.
Back in the day.
I thought that was another, I haven't seen that movie in a long time. And I'd honestly completely forgot it existed until I
And you saw it and you're like,
over
oh man, that was a good one.
Like, oh shoot, I got to go back and watch that again.
Yeah. When he was tapped to do Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Tim Burton had asked him if he'd ever read the books or watched the movie or anything like that.
Yeah.
He said no. Should I? Tim Burton said, absolutely not.
Oh yeah, no.
Don't do it. He said, just go with what you know and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he was asked if he had seen the original 70s movie musical with Gene Wilder, because I'm sure he read the book, because otherwise how would he have adapted it to a screenplay?
Sure. Right.
But yeah, he said, no, don't watch the movie. Just read the book. So a lot of the story for that one isn't inspired by the movie. It's inspired by the book, which is
Yeah.
why it's probably so wildly different.
Yeah, and that's, I will say, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, not my favorite adaptation. I'm not going to call it bad because everyone likes their own thing. It just wasn't my style. I do prefer the original 70s
But
version.
completely different than the
Completely
70
different.
versions.
Yep,
Yeah.
different feel, different outlook, different style.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the original 70s version was not as close to the source material, but I
Yeah.
still prefer it. I hate to admit.
He also hosts a weekly podcast as well.
Oh, does he really?
With his fellow screenwriter, Craig Mazin,
Okay.
which I didn't do any research in, so I don't know what he's written, but they do a podcast called Script Notes about crafting screenwriting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they've been doing it since 2011.
I'm sure that's super informative.
I know I can see your wheels turning
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
Another podcast
I
to
mean,
add to the 30 that I have.
Oh, sorry. Like triple that number?
Yeah, so I didn't have to say that because 30 was crazy enough,
Yeah,
but
sorry.
he went ahead and dug that hole.
Yeah,
No, he's lying in it. Oh, I'm burying him back up now. It's up to his neck.
Constant podcast listener, like 8 to 12 hours a day.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm surprised he doesn't have an earbud in right now, honestly.
I do.
You do not.
No, okay, no. So anything else on John August?
Nope.
Well, let's start breaking into some of the cast then.
Yay.
How about that?
Can we start with Ewan McGregor?
Of course, I would insist nothing less.
OBE. Ewan McGregor, OBE.
OBE?
Yes. Because he is the officer of the most excellent order of the British Empire. I'll have you know.
See, I thought you were trying to spell Obi-Wan.
No, when I first read that, though, I was like, what? Is that his new nickname or something? I had to look it up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I had no idea what that meant. So, hooray.
Yeah.
Learned something new.
It's a British Order of Chivalry.
Oh, my.
Yep. Rewarding contributions to the arts and sciences. And it came back and became a thing back in 1917. So it's not like super old, but it's pretty
been around
old
a bit.
honor. Yeah. A lot of people can have it, though. It's not limited to a certain number.
So, sort of giving out like candy, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have one, but
Well.
anyway. Ewan McGregor is one of my favorite actors.
He absolutely is. I can verify that.
Yeah. I think Moulin Rouge sealed it for me. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You had big obsession.
I did. I still love that movie.
Yeah. That film still gets pretty regular play around here.
Somebody asked me at work, yesterday, what my favorite movie was, and without hesitation, I said Moulin Rouge.
I'm not surprised. So Ewan's been acting for a while. He's got quite the list behind him, but his breakout role, as far as becoming known in a larger beyond the indie scene, I guess you could say, was in Trainspotting in 1996. He did play in plenty of films before that.
Yeah, I think he began his career with a leading role in a British series called Lipstick on Your Collar in 1993, but it was just in Britain, so we wouldn't have known about him.
Yeah,
at
not
that
here
point.
in the States
No.
at that point.
Yeah, but you're right. Trainspotting from 1996. Mark Renton, he played a drug addict named Mark Renton in that movie. It was kind of where he became really famous.
Yeah.
And then right after that, Obi-Wan.
And yeah.
Hello.
Right into episode 1 of Star Wars.
Was it 3 years later? 3 years later. 3 is a big theme during this.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really big
during
theme.
The story as well, yeah.
Yeah. I'm noticing it's like a new magic number for me. It's like,
great.
What was that movie? The number 21?
Number 23
23
with Jim Carrey.
With Jim Carrey, yeah.
Obsession, numerology.
3 is going to be my new obsession. Okay.
It is.
So he played Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then Moulin Rouge in 2001. And man, can that man sing and dance, and he's handsome, and I just love him. Anyway.
Yeah, and he did all of his own singing in that film.
He did it all. And then right after that, Black Hawk Down. And I loved that movie too. He was really good in that one.
That was I'm not much for military films.
No.
But that was a pretty good one.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the same year as Moulin Rouge. And then Big Fish.
Big Fish.
In 2003.
Star Wars episode 1 through 3.
Yeah.
And then 3 years, yeah.
So then he was also in the thriller Angels and Demons.
Yep. I remember
one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows me, they know I'm not a reader. I don't like to read.
Not typically.
It makes me sleepy. I don't like reading. I can read. I just don't like it.
Occasionally comic books and mangas.
Yeah, that stuff is great. But for whatever reason, Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, I could read those 2 novels through, and I had no problem with them.
I'm still surprised you managed to read those because
they were so good.
Yeah, you're just not a reader.
I'm not a reader.
And also The Island.
Oh, The Island.
Have to mention that.
There's so many good films that he's been in.
I mean, The Island, not going to be topping any charts as far as, hey, this is a wonderful piece of film, but really, again, hate to say it, a fun adventure film.
Yeah, it is.
It's good. Like, one of my themes is,
epic,
it's a fun
adventure film, like big scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's also done some directing.
Sure.
I'm not too familiar with his directing, to be honest. He did a crime-filled film called American Pastoral in 2016, which he also starred in. He also did a dual role as brothers Ray and Emmett in the 3rd season of Fargo from 2017.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of that TV series, but I've heard it's really good.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's done some directing and, producing, but I know him more for his acting.
Right, of course. So do I.
He's also done the theater. So he was in Guys and Dolls from 2005 to 2007, Othello from 07 to 08. He's also been involved in all sorts of charity work and served as an ambassador for UNICEF UK since 2004. I mean, the man is...
He's busy.
Yes.
Busy all the time.
One of the best documentaries I ever watched was Long Way Around from 2004, where he and his friend Charlie Boorman took motorcycles across the continent of Asia, going through, Mongolia and India and...
That'd be a dream of a trip.
Yeah. And they just on their motorcycles. So they got stranded a lot, and they had to get rides on horses. I mean, it's a really fun adventure to watch because they did it without a lot of extra help.
Sure.
It was just them on the road. Ewan actually ended up even adopting one of his children when he was in Mongolia. There was a child that was living on the streets, and he legally adopted one of those kids. So I thought that was pretty nice.
That's pretty incredible.
They both went on to do 2 other documentaries, kind of in the same style in different places, Long Way Down and Long Way Up, in 2007 and 2020 on Apple TV. I haven't seen that one yet.
Covering all of the vectors.
Yeah. So if you want to see if you like documentaries and you want to see, a pretty good documentary, I would say it's worth watching.
Yeah.
Not something I would typically watch, but of course I watched it because Ewan was in it.
Of course you did.
But it was actually really good.
Right.
So, yeah, I would recommend watching that one.
Just a bonus.
Definitely a bonus. Ewan's also a naturalized U.S. citizen. He did this after 2016 so that he was able to vote in the 2020 U.S. presidential election.
Oh, that a boy.
Yeah. And during his journey on Long Way Up, which I believe was in the States here, he traveled entirely on his U.S. passport.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah. So he used it all.
Thanks, Britain. We got him now.
Yeah. I'm almost done talking about Ewan. I'm sorry. I've got so much to say about him.
It's all right.
I'm almost there.
Yeah, you can fawn. It's okay.
So Ewan identifies as a feminist.
That a boy.
I love.
Yeah, that's great.
In 2009, he said, and I quote, "Women are always expected to be naked in films. But I like to try and do it so they are not naked. Have a woman not be naked. It's a feminist thing that I do."
That a boy, taking one for the team.
Thanks, Ewan. We all appreciate you. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
In 2017, he refused to appear on Piers Morgan's show after Morgan made disparaging remarks about participants of the 2017 Women's March.
Nice.
I feel like there are a lot of men who say they're feminists, but when it comes down to it, they don't speak up or say anything.
Yeah, they don't use their platform to, and they won't speak up.
Crickets.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, it's cool.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. He speaks up.
Yeah, that a boy.
Yeah. And in 2023, he also signed an open letter by Arts for Ceasefire. So he's also, really involved in that kind of stuff as well.
Sure.
He's just really, I don't know.
Philanthropic. Very humanitarian.
Yeah. I mean, both his parents, I think, were teachers.
Yep, I believe so.
Yeah, they were both, and he came from a pretty humble background. I know his brother's a pilot.
Now that's a skill.
Yeah, his brother, I thought I wrote it down somewhere, but maybe I did not. But his brother's really good pilot. Like he's been on a few like the Blue Angels kind of a thing, but like the British version.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
So the British Angels.
The British Angels, yeah. Yep, the good old British Angels.
Yeah. I don't know what they're really called, but there we go.
It's not that.
Not that at all.
No. So yeah, did you have anything else on our friend Ewan?
Not much more. Just felt like it would be worth mentioning that he did reprise his role from Trainspotting again recently in Trainspotting 2.
Yeah.
And of course, reprised his Obi-Wan Kenobi role in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Yeah, which is great because I think that it always bothers me when an actor commits to a role and then they decide to do that have that role again, and the actor's like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
so then you
yeah.
got to get somebody else to do it, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's just not as fun.
No.
You want to see that person who made that role famous.
Heck
Bring them
yeah.
back again.
Especially since he was so good at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on from Ewan then and on to Albert Finney, since that sort of makes sense, since they both technically played the same character.
They both played Ed Bloom. Albert Finney playing senior Ed Bloom, of course.
Absolutely.
Yep. He wasn't actually originally supposed to play Ed Bloom.
Albert Finney?
Yeah.
Who was?
So Sony originally wanted Brian Cox to do it.
Oh, okay.
So they gave the casting supervisor, her name's Denise Chamian. They gave her a picture and said, this is who we want.
Right.
She thought they gave her a picture of Albert Finney because Albert Finney and Brian Cox look a lot alike.
They do share a similarity.
Yeah. And so she offered him the part. He took it.
Huh.
And then by the time Sony actually realized that this mistake had even happened, they were already too far into production to change it.
Whoopsie doodles.
Yeah. So he wasn't actually supposed to play that part, but
still, such a great casting with Albert Finney.
Yeah, I originally read that they wanted Albert Finney because he looked a lot like a young Ewan McGregor when he was younger. But I'm wondering if that was the same to be said for Brian Cox too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know which came first. It's kind of a chicken egg situation. I don't. But they always say that young Albert Finney looked a lot like Ewan.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why they picked him.
I've seen a few pictures of him younger, and I can see the similarities.
He was handsome too.
Yeah,
I think I'd have been into that as well.
Right? Yeah, I'm sure you would have. And I do know that Albert Finney and Ewan McGregor both shared a dialect coach.
They did, yeah.
To
makes them sound alike.
Yeah, so they both can have sort of a similar accent.
They also
way
shared
of speaking.
learning how to fish together.
That's right.
As a way to bond.
And a way to kind of bring their personalities together.
It's funny because as you read about these two characters, even though they're playing the same person and they are a lot alike on a personal level, like as actors, like real people, there's also like these stark differences. So while they're both extremely successful, very, very good actors, one seemingly loves the attention and the limelight. The other one
very reclusive.
Is a freaking hermit.
Yeah.
And wants nothing to do with it. Even though they're both on the same level as far as, their acting experience and talent. Yeah. Albert Finney wants nothing to do with it. He was actually offered commander of the most excellent order of British Empire. And he turned it down.
Oh, that a boy. I can, good for you, man.
And he said, quote, that they perpetuate one of our diseases in England, which is snobbery. I love that.
I love that as well. I'm very much not a man of pomp and circumstance. It's just not my style.
Yeah. When I read that, I was like, that sounds like something Brandon would say.
I probably would have. If somebody wanted to honor me with something, I'd probably go the same route.
Yeah. Or you would go fishing instead of being at the Oscars?
Probably wouldn't go fishing, but I would probably read comic books instead of going to the Oscars.
Which he also did.
Right.
Quite regularly. Matter of fact, I have a list of the things that he refused to do.
All right, hit me with it. I want to know.
He never had an agent.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ever had an agent. He never went to a single Oscar ceremony.
Matter
of fact, I think the first one he said he was on vacation.
Yeah, that's all right.
He refused to do a biography of his life. Somebody offered to do a biography of his life before his death. He was diagnosed with cancer. And so somebody came to him and said, hey, let's do an autobiography or a biography of your life. And he said, no, I don't want it.
Yeah.
So he didn't want that. He refused to grant interviews. So I think there's one on record, but it never got produced or never got shown. But for the most part, he would refuse almost all of the interviews. He admitted to being wary of Hollywood and all it represents.
Sure, I can understand that.
He declined Laurence Olivier's invite to be head of Britain's National Theatre.
Wow. It strikes me as something because I have no interest in ever taking any leadership roles in anything because it's not worth all the hassle.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. I mean, I think he worked for a theater company in Britain, but it wasn't one where he was appointed to it. I think he just never really wanted to be somebody that was appointed to something, like told what to do. He kind of just wanted to do his own thing.
Sure.
Yeah. But like I said, he was diagnosed with cancer in 2011, but that's not actually what ended up killing him. He got a chest infection in 2019 and died at the ripe old age of 83.
Poor fella.
But he lived a while.
Yeah, he had a good life.
Yeah, and he started his career in the theater. He was actually really well known for doing Shakespearean plays.
Yeah.
Until the 70s, when his portrayal of Macbeth did not go so well.
Oh, really?
So he refused to do Shakespearean theater after that.
Yeah, because he was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company, wasn't he?
Mhm. Yeah, he was really good at it. He was really well known for it.
Huh.
And then something happened with his performance.
Macbeth just didn't do it for him.
And he was not, it did not give him good reviews. So he decided not to go back to it. Yeah.
Well, that's all right. Because, I mean, he did go on to play a few other very well-received and memorable roles in cinema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he debuted in The Entertainer in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't the main character. He was a character named Mick Rice, who was the main character, Archie Rice's son. And Archie Rice was played by Laurence Olivier.
Ah.
He also played opposite Audrey Hepburn in Two for the Road from 1967.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I watched a couple of clips of it because I wanted to see what young Albert Finney looked like. And he's pretty handsome, but he was so silly in that movie.
Yeah, and he was, I was reading, he's the only person who on screen called Audrey Hepburn a bitch.
I love that.
Yeah, that's sort of just a fun little throwaway little bit there.
One of my favorite movies when I was a kid was Annie from 1982.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was Daddy Warbucks in that one.
Daddy Warbucks.
Yeah, and so I watched a couple clips of that, and I was like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It just shocked me to the core.
It's not something that you typically think of, but yeah, absolutely. He did that role really well.
He did. He really did. He was also in Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express in 1974. Hercule Poirot. Yes. I had to look up how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
And I wrote it down here so I did not mispronounce it.
Yeah.
But that's a hard one.
Agatha Christie had said that he embodied what she envisioned Hercule to be.
Mm-hmm. He had a lot of makeup on that one.
Yeah,
I watched a clip of it and I was like, you cannot tell it's him.
He was offered the sequel, or I guess not a sequel, but a second in that series as a role. And he turned it down because it was going to be shot in Saudi Arabia, I believe. And he said the makeup was too much and too hot just in the Murder on the Orient Express, let alone shooting a film in Saudi Arabia.
And he's not one to please other people. No. Only himself.
No.
Only himself.
Not super selfishly, but just out of, he wants to live his life the way he wants to live it.
No. Well, I mean, it's selfish, but it's your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Live it the way you want to live it. Yep. He also played Minister of Police in the movie The Duelist from 1977. And this is actually Ridley Scott's motion picture debut.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So he was in one of Ridley Scott's very first movie that he ever did. So I thought that was interesting.
That's pretty cool.
It wasn't a huge part, but he was in that one. And then, of course, his last movie credit was for his role as Kincaid in Skyfall in 2012.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yep.
A little James Bond action.
Yes, which his son is a cinematographer, and he did the cinematics for that movie. So they kind of worked on that movie together.
Sort of, I guess.
Sort of, a little bit. But his son has also done so many things. I mean, I'm not going to go into it too much, but, he's done like Barbie, Indoor, Wonder Woman, Game of Thrones, Solo, Skyfall. Yeah. Like, he's done all sorts of stuff too. So it runs in the family.
Yeah, another person keeps himself quite busy.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of sons, I guess that's a good segue for us to talk about Billy Crudup.
Yes, Billy Crudup.
Because he plays
Will Bloom.
Will Bloom, Edward's son in Big Fish.
Mm-hmm.
What have you got about Billy?
He's married to Naomi Watts.
Well, that's an achievement in and of
big.
itself.
That's huge. His biggest claim to, I don't want to say fame, but like his biggest moneymaker is the voice of the MasterCard commercials. Do you remember the Priceless commercials?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's the voice of all those commercials. And so he actually turns I don't know if he still gets roles now, but he used to turn down just a ton of roles because he was making enough money doing the voices for those commercials.
Whew. Who would have thought working for MasterCard would be that
lucrative?
Profitable,
I mean, he turned down the role of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho and Bruce Banner in Hulk. He turned those down, which I think actually he would have been really good as a Bruce Banner, to be honest.
Yeah, I can
American
see him.
Psycho, I think. I'm glad that he turned that one down.
Yeah, I don't think he would have pulled that one off.
No, Christian Bale was so good in that one.
Christian Bale totally nailed that role for sure. Billy, he starred as Russell Hammond in Almost Famous, which I think is probably
the one you know him from.
The one I'd probably know him as from the best.
Yeah.
I think probably even would be considered his breakout role.
Sure.
But also Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. I mean, that's a huge role.
That's a huge role, yeah.
Lesser known role in Alien Covenant as well. from 2017.
Oh, yeah. Outside of that, though, he's just happy being in his commercials.
Happy being Mr. MasterCard.
Yeah. So maybe we should talk about Jessica Lange next.
I think that's a great idea.
Jessica Lange. She is ranked 85 on Premiere Magazine's 100 Greatest Performances of All Time for her performance as Frances Farmer in Frances.
Oh, yeah.
From 1982.
Mm-hmm.
She was also chosen by Empire Magazine as one of 100 sexiest stars in film history.
Wow.
She's number 64.
She's a beautiful lady.
She was in King Kong. That was her film debut.
Ooh.
Publicity not so great on that one.
No.
They said she acted too much like an airhead and she was too stupid. And I guess everybody agrees that her performance wasn't bad. It was the directing for her performance. She didn't take another role again for 3 years. So she did waitressing.
3.
Yeah, 3 again, right?
Oh man.
I just realized that.
Here we go.
3 again. So then she did All That Jazz, Cape Fear, A Streetcar Named Desire, Sybil, The Politician. I mean, she's been in a lot of stuff. American Horror Story is kind of where I remember her from most recently.
Much more in the current day memory for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then Tootsie, another one that she did.
Tootsie.
She was in.
Yep.
Yeah. She's pretty well known for.
Dustin Hoffman.
All That Jazz and Tootsie actually have both been selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember correctly, we also talked about the Goonies as being in that same field of...
Yeah, select that company.
Yeah. But she's got 2 movies that are in there, so...
Good for Jessica.
Yeah. She also won Best Actress Academy Award for the mentally unbalanced wife of a military officer in Blue Sky. She's one of 24 actors to receive a Triple Crown Award, which is an Oscar, an Emmy, and a Tony.
Yeah, that's some pretty elite company there.
Yeah. So she's got quite a list of things under her belt.
Yeah, super talented.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, she captivates on screen.
You know, in Big Fish, there was a scene where she was in the bathtub with her husband, and man, that just broke my little heart.
Yeah.
The way that they loved each other.
Yeah.
She really sold that piece.
They really had fantastic chemistry on scene.
I'm going to tear up again.
Oh, here we go. Bring out your tissues, folks.
Okay. We're good. So yeah, that's all I have on Jessica Lange.
Yeah, that's about all I've got as well. But talking about one person's partner in this film, we might as well talk about the other. So with Maria Cotillard, she played Josephine in Big Fish, who was Will's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Big Fish was her first American feature
movie,
film. Yep. She does have plenty of listings under her belt as well, in France primarily. But Big Fish brought her some American attention. I would say her largest role that she's most well known for is as Edith Piaf in La Vie en Rose in 2007. So that won her an Academy Award. She got all sorts of recognition for that role. And you can understand why. She did an amazing job in that movie. Haven't seen it in a long time, but she was phenomenal. But of course, she also landed roles in Inception. Who's going to deny her that part as well? She did fantastic. She also had her role in The Dark Knight Rises with Christian Bale. There comes back again, another connection. But yeah, she's been around, done a lot of stuff as well.
She's a really good actress too. In Big Fish, she had a couple touching moments with the senior version of Ed, and they were it was really good. It really pulled at the heartstrings.
She was unfortunately more of a background character in this film, but
nonetheless,
boy,
she played the part, and without her, you wouldn't have gotten a lot of those stories because his son didn't want to talk to him about the stories.
He wanted nothing to do with any of that fantasy, and she was all about it.
She was needed to get that out. Speaking of first acting roles, do you know this is Miley Cyrus's first acting role?
Oh, right.
Yeah, she's in this movie very briefly in one of the stories that Ed Blooms tells. Yep. So it's not for very long, but she was 8 years old. Yeah. This was her very first film.
She was credited as Destiny Cyrus.
That's what she used to go by.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun little call out as well. I mean, this film had so many other stars of stage, screen, all that as well. I mean, you had Danny DeVito, Steve Buscemi. You mentioned already Helena Bonham Carter, Alison Lohman, who played the younger version of Jessica Lange's character,
Sandra Bloom.
Yeah, Robert Guillaume. Guillaume?
You were the one who was able to pronounce it. I wasn't. But he's Dr. Bennett. He voices Rafiki for The Lion King.
The Lion King, yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. You know, Danny DeVito played a circus ringmaster in this movie.
He did.
16 years later, he did it for Dumbo.
Did he really?
Yes. He's the ringmaster in Dumbo, which is another Tim Burton film.
And he also played the Penguin
He
in
did.
Batman Returns, which is another Tim
Burton film. Yeah.
Continuing on with the list here of little guest
Sorry,
stars.
I got distracted.
That's a great distraction. I think that's perfect. That's lovely because I call out those fun little things. That's the whole purpose of this whole thing. But we also had David Denman. So for people who are familiar with The Office, you may recognize him as Roy. Even Loudon Wainwright III showed up as the mayor of Spectre. It's quite the fun, eclectic cast.
There was also a man named Billy Redden in this film.
I know what you're going on with this one.
He does the iconic dueling banjo song from the film Deliverance from 1972. And so he was in this film doing the exact same song in the town of Spectre.
Yeah, I thought that was a really funny. When I saw
That's a
him
pretty
on
good
screen,
nod.
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. The Circus Fat Man was played by a famed sideshow attraction. Howard Hughes is what he goes by. His real name is Bruce Snowden. This film actually was his last appearance as a professional fat man. When he was on his heyday, his weight peaked at 712 pounds. Ooh. Which his career spanned 25 years. So when he died in 2009, he reportedly only in quotes, weighed 609 pounds. So many different, like, really cool people in this film.
We might as well go ahead and mention that Matthew McRory was in this film as well. He played Carl the Giant.
Yeah.
You may also recognize him. You may not recognize him from House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects because in that one he wore a mask his entire time.
Oh,
but his stature alone, I think, would give him away. Matthew McRory is 7 feet 6 inches tall. And in Big Fish, we see another large person. Yeah. They call him the Colossus in the circus.
They make him look so small in the film.
They make him look so small. However, the man who plays Colossus, George MacArthur, he's 7'3". He was only 3 inches shorter.
They made him look so much smaller.
They made him look incredibly small by comparison.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Matthew McRory, he did pass away, unfortunately, in 2005. He was only 32.
He was a big dude.
He really was. Yeah. It seems like such a personality to go with him as well. But very soft-spoken, it seemed. That just is his style, I guess.
Yeah. Tim Burton was in the film, too. I don't know if you knew that.
In Big Fish? Who was he in Big Fish?
He was one of the clowns that was sitting next to Mr. Calloway's trailer.
Oh, was he really? Sneaking in there with some face makeup.
Yeah, he played a clown, so you wouldn't have known if it's him or not. But he was in the film, too.
Welcome to the show.
He's in a lot of his films, I think, isn't he?
He does tend to make appearances.
Even if it's just little ones.
Well, before we get into a few more facts about the film or little tidbits, little fun stuffs about the film, let's take a moment real quick to just kind of mention the acclaim that the film got when it was released. Do you have any financial information or any of your legs?
Yeah, I do.
All right, what you got?
I do. So we had a budget of $70 million, which is quite a bit larger budget than some of the other films we've talked about, especially last week when we talked about Upgrade. Upgrade had a budget of $3 million.
So small by comparison.
You wouldn't be able to tell the difference in terms of like its grandiose nature.
Yeah.
Because this one was $70 million, and opening weekend though it only did $207,000, and it only did $66.4 million domestically. So it didn't do very well.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Not domestically. Overall, worldwide, its box office take was $123 million. So it seemed to make it up thanks to the rest of the world.
And their British counterparts.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that helped a lot, especially Albert Finney. He's pretty well known in England. So this one had 4.81 legs.
Oh boy.
And for reference, if we can remember back to Dumb and Dumber, that had a score of 7.77.
Yeah.
And I believe Upgrade had a score of like 3 something.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.
Probably something like that.
Yeah. So this one had 4.8. So it's still not living up to the Dumb and Dumber standard.
No, that's a pretty high bar.
It's a high bar. Even when I was reading about it, they were saying that's a lot of legs. This one had shorter legs. This one also did get lots of nominations.
Yeah.
Lots of nominations.
Lots of nominations.
Did you see any that they won?
No.
Yeah.
It didn't win stuff, unfortunately.
Again, like some of the other films we've talked about, it did get a nomination at the Academy of Science, Fantasy, and Horror Films Saturn Awards in 2004 for Best Actor Albert Finney, but he lost to Elijah Wood.
Oh, wow.
And it got a nomination for Best Fantasy Film, but guess what it lost to? If it got Elijah Wood was the actor. What film do you think came out in 2004 that it lost to that was a fantasy film?
Oh, are we going back to a Lord of the Rings sort of situation?
This is Lord of the Rings, yes. So that's the bummer, is when you're going against something like Lord of the Rings, you're probably not going to even be in the running.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's tough to really compete with that big shadow.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It did also get an Academy Award nominee for Best Musical Score.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny Elfman is usually always associated with Tim Burton films.
Yeah,
so that's what it was for, yeah.
A lot of collaboration, those two.
Yep. Anything else you got for acclaim?
Not a whole ton, just that it was generally well received by critics and audiences. People seemed to enjoy it. It just didn't seem to get the word of mouth or butts in seats that it should have, I guess.
Nobody wanted to sit in the theater and cry. That's probably why.
That's probably it. Yeah, when you break a few hearts, you're not going to get many people coming back for repeat viewings. But yeah, that's really all I got. In my opinion, screw all the acclaim anyway. It was still a great film.
It was still a great film, and I think we had talked about some of the influences that, kind of came through with this film coming to be what it was. But I think the biggest one, aside from the writer writing the story, the whole concept and idea and premise all kind of came from Tim Burton's heart. He used animatronics, robots, lots of practical effects instead of using, computer generated animation. They used a lot of
spiders.
Yeah, low budget spiders, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. They used real puppet-y-esque spiders. Yeah. And some of them were stuck to the suit, so you had to
just kind of
pluck them off of him. Super cool.
Fun with practical effects, folks.
Yes.
Well, okay, let's get into just kind of some more fun stuff about the world of Big Fish.
Yes, let's do it.
In and around and outside of. What do you want to start with? What do you got? What fun stuff can you bring to us?
Well, Edward Bloom, when he was a youngster, talked about how he was always destined to be bigger things. And so a lot of the stories that he tells at the beginning are of his growing up and being a bigger person, doing bigger things, being grandiose in nature. Talking to that witch and, starting that business with the lawnmower and the lawn care. There's all these just grandiose ideas he had as he kind of goes through. There's one scene where he's in a church and he's singing and they show him literally growing in his clothes.
Hit puberty all of a sudden and then stretching out.
And then his voice cracks.
Yep.
That was Ewan McGregor's voice.
Oh, yeah.
So when it cracks and it goes lower, it's actually Ewan's actual voice. So I thought that was kind of a cute little...
the pipes to bring it on home.
Yeah, it was a little added there. It was pretty good.
Well, mentioning getting bigger and, destined for bigger things.
It occurred to me then that perhaps the reason for my growth was that I was intended for larger things.
The film is called Big Fish, of course. The fish is mentioned throughout the film. In the opening of the film, the fish is just a large legendary fish that is inhabited by the ghost of a legendary thief. And then later on in the story, the fish represents Edward Bloom's wife that he has to catch to be his partner. And then at various other times, the fish, like you said, he's destined for bigger things. He's a big fish in a small pond.
You were a big fish in a small pond, but this here is the ocean, and you're drowning.
Yeah.
So the fish then represents him. It's just sort of a fun little theme where you can see this fish constantly used as a metaphor.
Yeah, so I think I talked about 3 years being a recurring theme in the film. I think it started with Tim Burton's parents' death because his dad died and then 3 years later his mother died. Or maybe there was coincidence and he just went with it. But there's examples in there where Edward doesn't talk to his son Will or his son doesn't talk to his dad for 3 years.
After that night, I didn't speak to my father again for 3 years.
Edward stays in his bed for 3 years after he started growing uncontrollably.
Oh, that's nothing. Once I had to stay in bed for 3 years.
He worked for Callaway Circus for 3 years.
I've spent the last 3 years working to find out who you are.
He served in the army for 3 years. It's just kind of a reoccurring theme. And the more we talk, the more I'm finding other things where it's creeping me out.
Leia's getting obsessed. Next episode is going to be just Brandon, folks, because Leia's going to be in a room surrounded by threes.
Writing threes on the wall.
In reference to the fact that Will and his father didn't talk for 3 years. When they do finally get together, Edward is basically stuck in a bed. Will wants to get to know his father more.
I just want to know the true versions of things.
And what he views as the real Edward Bloom, right?
Dad, I have no idea who you are because you've never told me a single fact.
Put all of the legendary tales, all of the exaggerations.
You tell lies, Dad. You tell amusing lies.
Put all of that aside. He wants to get to know his father. So I've always liked the quote and the idea that Will always says he doesn't know his father, even going so far as to exclaim that he just wants him to be himself. But then Edward asserts,
I've been nothing but myself since the day I was born. And if you can't see that, it's your failing, not mine.
which is, I
sad.
think it's very touching, and it's very, it's a way of saying, hey, I am who I am. The stories are just part of me. The way I tell stories, the way I exaggerate and elaborate and try to entertain, and this is me. This is my personality. You can't condemn me for that. I'm telling you the stories of my life. You're getting me.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
I've told you 1,000 facts. Well, it's what I do. I tell stories.
Yeah, the stories don't always have to be exact truths. The stories have to be stories,
That living legend that kind of goes from person to person. And
Yeah.
it's almost like a way of that person still being alive.
Yeah, that verbal history that
Yeah.
just kind of goes down through the ages.
Yeah, which is something, you've seen for years. You look back in history, and that's people tell these stories, these myths, these, urban legends, they're stories that get passed down.
In all of his fantastical stories, he's always portrayed very bold, and he's got unending bravery. That's all brought back to the fact that in one of his early stories that we hear when he goes to see the swamp witch.
Yet of all the witches in Alabama, there was one who was said to be the most feared.
Him and his friends are out there, and everyone understands that this is the witch's house, and you don't go near it because she's a creepy old witch. If you see her eye,
I heard if you look right at it, you'll see how you're gonna die.
Edward says, screw it, I'll do it. I'll go steal this witch's glass eye. A few of his friends go with him, and they end up seeing the witch's eye. She exposes her eye to them.
So they all see their deaths.
They see their deaths, and they run away.
We see their deaths,
And
too.
we do as well. They all run away in terror. Edward, however, doesn't look in the eye immediately. It's not shown to him. But he stands there contemplating and says,
I want to see.
really, if you see your death, you can live your life boldly, knowing that nothing's going to hurt you because you know how you're going to die.
Because everything else, you could survive.
It's just sort of a neat way to tie that whole theme together, that all of his stories, he's bold and big because he's got nothing to fear because he knows how he's going to die. So that's...
Yeah, and it's never made clear what it is.
Yeah, we never see it.
You never see it. But at the end, he asks his son to explain how he dies. And so he explains the whole thing, and you never really understand whether, Will just knows how he's supposed to die,
Right.
or if maybe what he saw in the witch's eye was Will telling him the story of how he dies. Maybe that's how he's supposed to die, and he knew that this whole time.
Yeah.
You don't ever really know, but it didn't matter because,
Yeah.
the ending was still just beautiful the way it was.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the film where he's in the war,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a ventriloquist dummy at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the guy is doing the ventriloquism, and it's so bad.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Funny.
It's super
It's
awful.
so
It's
funny.
awful on purpose.
It's awful on purpose. But Tim Burton actually kept that ventriloquist dummy from the war, and he put it in his home, and he named it Lange.
And you can even see at one point, Edward Bloom breaks out a translation book from, I believe, Mandarin to English. But not every character is speaking Mandarin. But I do recall reading that it was done with a purpose that way,
Yes.
saying that the reality is they're all speaking many different languages. And this is part of Edward Bloom's exaggeration.
Yeah.
His tall tales. There's no way he could have translated everything everyone is saying with just that one book.
One little book.
That's part of the story.
Yeah.
Part of the magic of the whole ordeal.
Yeah. There's two women that sing on that stage too during that scene, and they're actually twins, which I thought was interesting.
Real life twins, yeah.
Real life twins. And they created a corset for them to wear that kind of held their waists together, and then they had to do some CGI for
Some
the
CGI.
film. So they had to remove each of their legs for the
Yeah.
CGI, and they appeared much skinnier than I think they probably would have in real life.
I can only imagine that corset was really uncomfortable.
Yes, yeah, but they're supposed to be conjoined. If you haven't seen the film, they're supposed to be conjoined twins with just 2 legs, 4 arms, 2 torsos, 2 heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're actual twins. And, of course, I won't tell you to spoil it for you, but you see them again at the end,
Yeah, you
you know.
Oh, we spoke earlier about the Swamp Witch.
Mm-hmm.
There's another sort of neat little cue that happens. So there's a point in the film where Will starts observing small things from his father's fantasies in real life. And whether it's just Will beginning to accept those things or if it's Will imagining those things, certainly it's not reality bending into fantasy. It's somewhere in his imagination.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, Will goes to see, he finds a deed that his father has in storage. So he goes to this address, which is in a town called Spectre.
Didn't he even say to his mother, like,
That really happened?
Not everything your father says is a complete fabrication.
And in the town of Spectre, he finds this sort of shambled looking shack, this kind of rundown home. And in this home, there's a woman giving a piano lesson to a child. Will finds out that this person is the Jenny from his father's story. Well, while Jenny is telling Will about the real version, quote unquote, of Edward,
or a more real version,
a more
at
real
least,
version, there's a small moment where her right eye, ever so briefly, very quickly, you can see clouds over. Like
I did notice that, yeah. You know, the town of Spectre is a real town that they built.
Yeah.
They built it in Montgomery, Alabama, on a private island. It's called Jackson Lake Island in Alabama. Google Maps it and look at it. The town still exists to this day on this really beautiful island on this little, it's almost like a river that goes around this piece of land. It's still there. It's really cool.
And it's still open to tours. You can go visit it yourself. People still throw shoes over the
telephone wire.
Yep. The one unfortunate piece is that in July of 2023, the witch's house, the very house that we had just spoken about, got struck by lightning and burned down.
Oh, well, that one wasn't, slated to last very long anyways. It's fine.
But the rest of the town is still there.
That's cool. That is funny.
Which is pretty magical.
Just the witch's house, which is, I think it's fitting, actually.
Yeah, I think it's funny, but it's a bummer that one house is gone.
That one house.
The town of Spectre itself, this magical looking location in the middle of this swamp, this dark and dreary forest, this haunted forest that he had to trek through to get there. It's bright, it's well manicured, it's idyllic, it's paradise-like, utopian.
No streets.
No streets.
They wear shoes and no shoes, and there's just grass everywhere.
There is no softer ground than town.
That almost rhymes.
He's our poet laureate.
The funny part is as utopian as it is, you come to notice that nobody really has meaningful conversation. And a character played by Steve Buscemi, Northern, he's a famous poet who apparently in the quote-unquote real world had gone missing for a number of years. Well, he's here in Spectre. And at some point, he shows a work-in-progress poem to a young Edward.
Sorry,
and
this poem.
It's the most dull, boring...
It's only 3 lines.
It's only 3 lines long.
But it's not, it's uninspired.
Oh, yeah.
It's dull, it's boring, it's something that
Did you write it down?
No, I did not.
3-year-old would write
3-year-old maybe would write. It sort of shows that this beautiful, idyllic town is too comfortable and complacent, that the people there are too
uninspired
with what they have because they have more than they need. Creativity is missing from this place. And Edward left home because he's destined for bigger things.
Yeah.
So he can't stay as much as they want him to stay. And when he arrives, they say he arrives too early.
Oh, here you are right here, Edward Bloom. We weren't expecting you yet.
You were expecting me?
Not yet.
But he refuses to stay because he's destined for bigger things.
He almost has a panic attack.
Yeah.
It's like it's smothering him all over again. And he couldn't stay. He had to leave.
He had to go.
Yeah. Earlier we were talking about cameos, and I forgot to mention that Johnny Depp had a voice cameo in this movie.
Did he really?
Yeah.
For what?
He was the voice of the catfish that the younger Edward Bloom caught on his wedding ring the day that Will was born.
No kidding.
Yeah. So he was working on Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl in 2003, but Burton was able to get Depp to stop by the studio during post-production to make a voice cameo for his film. Because, as we all know, Johnny Depp is in all of Burton's films.
Right. Yeah, basically.
And this is no exception. He's uncredited in this, so you wouldn't see his name in it. But
I had no idea.
The catfish actually has a name that the studio came up with.
Oh, really?
Do you want to hear what it is?
Yes, I do.
Brutus McGillicuddy Shamu IV.
Wow.
Did you read about the fish and like how Tim Burton made it all come together? He actually set it up on tracks underwater. So it was a real puppet, and he explicitly asked for curly whiskers.
Oh, of course. What's more magical than curly whiskers?
Well, that's a Tim Burton thing.
You know, he likes his spirals,
curls and spirals and weird looking things,
Nightmare
right? So
Before Christmas.
it had to have curly whiskers, and so they set up a railroad track type thing, but underwater, and they had to push this thing on this track to make it swirl around them and then swim off. But it was all done with animatronics and puppetry, and I just think that's so Tim Burton.
Yeah, sticking with the whole idea that you mentioned, he wanted to stay with practical effects.
Yeah, and that was no exception. And he didn't want it to look like a catfish because, as we all know, catfish are not attractive. They're ugly.
Really
they're kind of slimy looking.
Gross
they're
little bottom
gray.
feeders.
Yeah,
they're cool. They are awesome.
They're necessary and they are awesome, but they're not pretty.
Yeah.
He wanted the catfish to look just like all of Edward's stories. He wanted them to be magical and fantastical. Yeah. So another reason why they didn't go with a typical looking catfish.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I understand.
You talked about Matthew McGrory.
Yes.
Carl the Giant earlier. He actually got a custom made set of shoes for his feet for the movie.
I can only imagine those were enormous.
They were made out of luggage.
Wow.
And I think they did it to recreate like how you would make a giant's shoes. Because in the movie, he's a giant.
Yeah, a giant.
His feet are the size of Volkswagens, you know what I mean? But when he was alive, he held the Guinness Book World Record for the largest feet.
Oh, what was his shoe size?
Give me a guess.
Oh, man. I don't know shoe size as well. I know I'm like a size 9.5.
9.5.
And that's, I'm
take
sure.
Take that times 3.
Holy crap. Really? So what's that, like 29.5?
Exactly.
29.5.
Yes.
Holy crap.
29.5 foot shoe.
Yikes.
Yep. He was so appreciative to the costume designers that they made him these shoes, that he kept them and he continued to wear them.
He should.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do with those shoes?
Well, no one else can wear them, right?
Let him have them, man.
Yeah.
For God's sakes. Holy cow.
I'm sure it's expensive to custom make this man's shoes.
And you also have to then really want to figure out what luggage they use to make those shoes, because that must be the most comfortable luggage. I mean, if that man carrying around that carriage on those feet in those shoes, if he kept them,
good on you.
I got to know what luggage that was.
We actually talked about how uncomfortable he must have been, in his later years, you know, only living to be what you said, 32. I mean, it's not later, but for him, it was later. He looked uncomfortable. Yeah. So I can't imagine. The shoes had to be a small comfort for he was hunched over and just looked uncomfortable.
I mean, you could see in the way he walked, I'm certain he had difficulties with a lot of things, despite whatever discomfort he may or even may not have been in.
Yeah.
I don't know. He seemed to be relatively upbeat.
Yeah, he was.
Which is great. I mean, some people with those big hardships, they manage to find the strength to just be positive people.
They give us all hope that we can be better too.
That's the truth.
So yeah, I think, for everything that I have, I think I'm toward the end of what I have.
I've got one last thing before I want to get into just like 3 or 4, maybe like 1 or 2 other little references to other films. At the end, there's an original song that's played by Pearl Jam. Tim Burton actually requested Pearl Jam to write an original song for this film.
For real?
Yeah, Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam as a group, I believe, were allowed to see an early work print of the film. And they loved it so much that they had written and recorded within 4 days this original song. They said they were moved by the film to such a degree that they just had to.
It was easy for them to bust out, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
So the film was called Man of the Hour.
The song was called Man of the Hour?
Yeah, sorry. The song was called Man of the Hour. So, but yeah, that's all I have for like exactly things about this film.
Sure.
But I do want to mention like 2 more quick things. You know me, I like musicals. I'm a musical fan.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but I do know this about you.
Big Fish was actually adapted to be a musical, which premiered in Chicago in April of 2013. I don't think it did very well. I don't believe it had a very long run. But also in the musical vein here, there's a point in the film when Edward Bloom arrives at the circus. There's a small little, what would you call it, leitmotif that is played. And it's taken from the song Orpheus in the Underworld Overture. That same small piece was used and elaborated upon in the song The Pitch/Spectacular Spectacular in Moulin Rouge. So here you see Edward Bloom, played by Ewan McGregor, being introduced to this ringed circus with this leitmotif from Spectacular Spectacular from Moulin Rouge.
I do like that connection.
Yeah, just a neat little connection there. But yes, okay, so that's really all I've got as far as fun stuff for Big Fish. I do have just one quick little spoiler. And even that is more just, I mean, it still is a spoiler, so I just don't want to exclaim it to the mountaintops right now. I do want to give everyone the chance to mosey on out if they
put your
feel
fingers
they want
in your
to.
ears.
Or, yeah, just do that. You don't got to
La
leave.
la 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 la, just
5, 4, 3, 2, and a 1.
I have to leave.
shoot.
Okay, so at the end of the film, when Will is recounting the way Edward dies, he's carrying his father down to the water.
Mm-hmm.
This is how he goes. He goes in the water, just like the big fish.
I think that was the only thing he told his son was, I don't go this way. You need to take me to the water.
Take me to the water,
Yeah.
yep. So you see him carrying his father past every character.
That he's told in all of his stories. And this is all Will recounting all of this.
Yeah, it's Will explaining,
which I love,
this method. But I just love that it's Will carrying his father through literally
all those
through
memories.
These crowds.
Yeah.
These crowds of people from his story. So he's literally carrying him through these stories to this water. It's Will finally accepting his father for who he has always been. It's Will saying, I'm carrying your legacy now, and I'm going to bring you forward through the use of your stories.
I'm getting goosebumps. I'm sorry. I got excited. I got some goosebumps. It's also the beginning of when Will was born.
Yeah.
And it comes full circle.
Yeah. When his father caught that fish.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And now he's turning into what he caught in the first place.
And then
returning him back to the water and becoming a fish.
Will releases his father into the water. You see him become the fish. Directly after that, we see kind of like a little flash forward to the future where there are children in a pool playing together. And there's one child particularly exclaiming these elaborate stories to his friends.
That's right, Dad?
Yeah, and one of his friends questions him on it. And he says, wait, that's the way it happened, Dad. And Will, standing at the barbecue, says, absolutely, that's exactly how it happened.
Pretty sure that's how it happened, son.
Exactly right. So I just
then cue the waterworks.
And then cue the waterworks.
I cried like a little bitch.
So I just thought that was a really fun way to bring the whole movie, all of the story, the legacy, the fantasy all together.
Not all of us have we have memories of our loved ones and things like that, but not a lot of us have, stories that we can tell that our parents told us when we were kids, and I think it's something really special that he finally embraced and was like, it's actually something really good that I have I can pass on to my kids that nobody else has.
Exactly. The stories are unique to Edward. Those are Edward stories.
Yep. Love that.
I guess that closes another movie theater lobby gathering, right? But we can still hang out. Go ahead and find me, Brandon McLeavy, as Brandon McLeavy on Facebook and on Instagram at BrandJNRP. And Leia, what about you?
You can find me, Leia McLeavy, at LM Nerd Room on all of the previous mentioned socials.
And of course, can also obviously find the movie theater lobby at themovietheaterlobby.com.
Yes.
Or email the show at themovietheaterlobby@gmail.com. Also, feel free to check it out at the Movie Theater Lobby on Facebook, but find The Movie Lobby on Instagram, YouTube, all of that.
All of the
fun stuff.
Fun credentials.
After you leave or when you get home, on your way out the door, right now even, if you want to just stop me from talking and go ahead and go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, wherever you get your podcast from, go ahead and leave us a rating, review, preferably the 5 stars.
That would be so nice. Thank you.
From what I understand, that's the
most
the highest wanted kind.
Yeah, it's the highest, honor that we could get.
I know we're just starting, and some of these are rough.
It may not be actual 5 stars, but if you could give us 5 stars, that'd be awesome.
Just go ahead in your mind, imagine a really fantastic episode. just like the stories.
Just
in
like the
Big
Big Fish stories.
Don't forget to unsilence your cell phones, finish your snacks, take your trash with you, and see us again next week on the movie theater lobby.
Yay. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Leia.
I thought you said you weren't dying.
I said, this isn't how I go. The last part is much more unusual. Trust me on that.